Well, that doesn't look right. Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a while, so I'm glad you're all able to make it today. We're working on a Cub Cadet HDS2135. I just picked this up at auction a couple weeks ago, and I don't know what the deal is, but lately in my area, riding mowers have been going for a lot more than they're worth. So I ended up paying $134 for this riding mower, and normally I'd only want to spend about 50 bucks because I don't know what's wrong with it. Obviously you can see 3 of the tires are shot just at a first glance. Now this machine was made in 1997, I believe, and at the time it retailed for about $1,800, so hopefully we don't gotta put too much into it. And I was just gonna go and try to put some tubes in these tires, but the front ones, there's hardly any tread left. And this rear, if it picks up, it's got a pretty good crack in it. So I don't know that a tube is gonna work for that one. And the other thing that complicates it is the front ones are standard size. The back ones, I think they're 9.5 inches wide. I can't remember exactly, but it's an odd size. So I've been having a hard time trying to find those. It seems like they don't make that size anymore. So I might have to get a tube for it and just see what we can do. Otherwise, I've got a parts machine that's parked. Let's go see what that's got. So this is a Lawn Chief. Not sure model or anything. I bought this just for a parts machine. Got it in the same auction. I paid $28 for this one. And I bought it, well, I bought both of them sight unseen, just looking at the pictures online, but I bought this one mainly as a gamble, strictly for the tires, hoping that I could use them. Since I couldn't do, or I'm thinking I can't do tubes, looking at a new set of tires was going to run about 175 bucks for all 4. Now I think that these front ones will work, but the back ones mount differently. The ones on the Cub Cadet are 20 by 9. These ones are 20 by 10. So I might see if I can get them to work. I was just going to throw them on there with the rim and everything, but it mounts differently, so I don't think that's going to work. But this machine is worth the 28 bucks. It came with a newer battery, so that was worth it. It's got a sweet suicide knob. That's going to go on my mower. And an engine that I know nothing about. So it's worth the gamble. We'll see what we can do with it. If I can get a couple of tires out of it, that's just a bonus. So I think what I'm going to do now is at least try to swap the fronts, see what I can do about the rears, just so we can get that Cub Cadet off the ground. So it turns out these are not the same size tires. As you can see, the original one's 15 by 6, the parts tractor 16 by 6.5. Now the shaft diameter is the same size, so it would work, but I'd have to come up with a spacer behind there. The rim width is apparently different, so I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do. These aren't going to work, so either I'm going to have to get tubes or replacement tires. So I'm going to put these back and then we'll move on. So here's my suspect tires. This is the rear. It's got pretty good cracks all around. I think just from sitting, but I can't tell. I don't think any of the cracks, I mean, they're pretty deep, but I don't think they go all the way through. And like I said, 20 by 9, it just seems like an odd size. I'm having a hard time finding a replacement. So I might have to try a tube. And for the fronts, these are easier to get, 15 by 6, but I don't know. If you don't got to spend the money on tires, why would you? They're okay. This one's got a decent crack in it. I don't know. I might replace the fronts and maybe get a tube for the back. Like I said, it was $175 for all four. The other rear is okay, but before I spend any money on tires, I suppose we should figure out if this thing runs. It is a Kohler overhead valve, and it looks like somebody's been kind enough to leave us some information. So like I said, this was produced in 1997, I believe. And it looks like first year of use they wrote down 2003, so they must have been the second owner. Last use in 2011 with 288 hours on it. Looks like we have 309 right now, so this thing is still basically new, and the battery is from 07 and it's looking pretty rough. So I'm glad that parts tractor at least had a battery. Let's pop the plug off and see how that looks. So if this thing's been sitting since 2011, that would make sense why the tires are all dry rotted. So it remains to be seen if there was some sort of catastrophic failure, which is the reason why it's been sitting, or if it was just sitting because of neglect. So, let's see, focus. Doesn't look too bad. I'll probably clean this up on the wire wheel, but nothing super alarming. See what we got for oil. Looks a little low. Little bit low, right at the end of the dipstick here, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. Maybe top her off. You guys remind me before I start this thing, throw some oil in there. And take the air cleaner cover off. Let's see if we got any goodies in there. Little bit of debris, but nothing crazy. The pre-filter looks pretty good. It's not all decayed. So I can tell you already, I'm not a super big fan of this setup because it's got this plate behind the air cleaner that the carburetor and all the linkages mount to on the backside. So I was hoping just to take the air cleaner off and get a sample, see what the bowl is looking at, but I can't really get at it, even just to get the bowl nut off without removing this whole plate, which of course, you know, you've got your throttle linkage hooked in here. I think the choke linkages as well. So that's going to be a little bit more involved. Kind of a bummer. Let's check and see if there's any fuel in here though. I don't know. Can you guys see in there? Looks fairly empty. If there is, there's not a whole lot. Smells like fuel. I guess that's to be expected. So we need to switch this battery out. This is the one that I got from the parts tractor. I have no idea if this one's good either, but 2019, much better chance than 2007. I've had that sitting on the charger for a day or so, and I think we got to remove this side panel. It's pretty tight to get this battery out. I'm not even sure if this is the right way, but we got to get in here anyway. So let's see if this gives us some space. That's a little better. There we go. All right. Now, I don't know, like, it's tight. I don't know if this hole, that doesn't make sense. It seems surprisingly difficult to just swap the battery. Maybe this arm comes out. Let's dig around a little bit. Perhaps that gives us a little bit of room. So hopefully this just needs a new battery, which I have, and we figure out the tires. I'm thinking if this thing runs, like I said, it was 1800 new 20 some years ago. Yeah, it's just corroded. I'm hoping to get about 600 for it if we can get it running. It's got an inline fuse. Let me work on getting these terminals undone, and then we'll figure out how this thing comes apart. All right, battery swapped out. I cleaned up the terminals best I could. Hopefully that'll make a difference. Basically what I'm trying to get at is just to see if I can bump this over, if the starter still works, if I get any of the electronics working, and then we can go from there. So I'm just going to throw the air cleaner cover back on, and just so I don't suck up anything while we're messing around. It's super sketchy too. I've got this thing up on jack stands, but because of all the safety switches, especially in the seat, I could jump the seat switch, but I don't really like doing that because then I'll end up forgetting it and then I'll sell it like that. So I prefer just to leave everything, all the safeties intact, unless we have to disassemble it. All right, we got some lights. That's good. Low oil. That's right, you guys didn't tell me to put some oil in. I'm gonna throw some oil in this thing and let's bump it over. All right, I've got some more oil in here, but I was thinking, instead of bumping this thing over, let's throw some gas in the spark plug or the spark hole and see if we can get this thing to cough. So I'm just gonna pop this back off again. Got a syringe here with some premium. Throw about that much in there. I just want it to cough. And then we'll see. Of course, it's helpful to drop the plug. And yes, if this thing does run, I will be changing all the fluids, doing an oil change. I'm not sure yet about hydraulic fluid. I really would like to avoid it. This thing takes, I think, 7 quarts of hydraulic fluid, and from what I understand, so the transmission runs on hydraulic fluid. It's a hydrostatic drive, It has 7 quarts of this proprietary Cub Cadet brand stuff, and I don't know, it's like 17 bucks a quart. So that's, was that $119? Oh, it's a lot. Let's start here. All right. Nothing. We have nothing. So either this battery's toast, or I've got a safety switch. All right, it's been a couple days, and I kind of ran out of time the other day, so I'm just checking to see if this battery is held a charge at all. I'm kind of suspecting that it has not. Either that, or I need to change these terminal ends, and I've got nothing on this battery. So it's only 3 years old, so I might just keep it on the charger for a little while longer, but for the time being we'll just throw the jumper pack on it. Okay, so the jumper pack was dying. I've got it on the charger. It's probably a little loud in the background noise, but bear with me. So I should have mentioned too that when I first got this machine, I confirmed that it would turn over, so it's not locked or anything. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to squirt some fuel into the air cleaner, or through the air cleaner, and then we'll see if we can get this thing to cough and fire. I want to confirm that we can get this running before I put any money into filters and fluids and tubes or tires. So let's see if we can get this thing to turn over. And we're gonna have a heck of a time there, so I might have to go through the plug hole. All right, so I've just got a little syringe with some fuel. Gonna squirt some down into the plug hole. Throw the plug back in. I did clean it up on the wire wheel too. It wasn't excessively dirty, but I figure it's not really that time consuming, and if a little bit helps, it's always a good idea. So we'll throw the plug back in and see if we can get this thing to cough and sputter and make some noise. There we go. So it runs. I feel a little bit better about spending some money. Let's try that again though. I'd like to, if we can, get it to run a little bit longer, just to kind of clear out some of the crud that's been sitting in here. And I do want to do oil change. Plug is a little wet. I do want to do an oil change, but I'd like to run it for a couple minutes. And we added some oil, so it should be good. I just want to stir up the crud that's on the bottom, get that mixed in, so we can get a nice clean flush. So a little bit more fuel, throw the plug back in. Started up pretty easy though. That that is exactly what I was hoping to see. All right, let's do a little bit of a shopping list here. It runs, so I feel better about spending some money. But there are a few things that need to be addressed. Obviously, the tires. 3 of the tires are bad. They don't hold air. The front 2 tires, the tread is pretty worn. The rear tire of the tread looks good, but it's got a pretty significant crack. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get tubes for the 3 tires. It's about $35 to replace all. Well, I'd have to replace all 4 tires to have a matching set, and it was going to be $175. So there's just not enough profit margin to replace the tires right now. So I'm going to start with doing tubes and see if that fixes the problem good enough. And it looks like we got a lot of debris in here, so I'm going to give this thing a nice date with the pressure washer. But it looks pretty wet around the fuel pump. So I don't know if there's a gasket that's leaking there. We didn't run fuel through the system, so that'll be, a diagnostic test further down the road to see if there's a problem there. And it looks like there's some wire nuts here. PTO probably got ripped off at some point, so we're gonna have to check the functionality of the PTO, make sure that engages. What else? One of these rear deck wheels, this one looks like it got kind of chewed up, so I'm gonna have to look for one of those, I think, or maybe a set. I haven't checked the deck. I don't know the condition of the spindles or the blades, so I'll have to look into that. The seat is okay. I'm probably not going to replace that. I mean, it's got your normal cracking and wear from being stored outside. So at this point, it kind of is what it is. Maybe we'll get some touch-up paint. But this tire's in good shape. It's kind of cool. These ones still have the Cub Cadet branded tires. And the front ones are, I think they're Goodyear, so the front ones have been replaced. But I think that's about it for right now. I'm going to go hop on the computer and order some parts, and I'll bring you guys back when they come in. Alright, it's a few days later, actually probably a week or so, and I got the tubes put in. Yes, I opted for tubes. I got tubes put in, tires are back on, and everything's looking pretty good. These front ones, they're pretty worn, not gonna lie. These ones I could replace. I probably should, but this rear one complicated things because this size, this Cub Cadet size, 20 by 9 by 8, I think. That one is obsolete. They don't make it anymore. So I could replace this tire with like a 20 by 10, but then I would have to also replace this one. And this one was fine. And I didn't want to do that. So I paid $35, I think, total for the 3 tubes, instead of $175 for a set of 4 tires. So I'm all right with that. Now that this thing should roll a heck of a lot better with 4 wheels as opposed to 1, I want to push it outside and give it a bath. It's pretty grimy, and I want to do an oil change, but I kind of suspect that there's an oil leak in here. I mean, this is grimy, we'll just say, and I can't see anything obvious yet. It's kind of everywhere, so I just kind of want to take the pressure washer to it and see if we can identify where it might be leaking from. I don't know if it's this drain port, because there's a bunch of gunk here, And this could just be residual, you know, left over from the last oil change or something. I just want to make sure that there's nothing leaking from up high. You know, it's just flinging around before I send this off to its next owner. So I'm going to push it out. We'll get it cleaned up. All right, how wet did I get you? So it's not perfect. That wasn't my intent. Once we get this thing all dialed in, running nicely, I'll go through and do some degreasing, possibly touch up some paint, make it all nice and pretty for the next owner. I just wanted to, you know, get the basic grime off so I could see if this oil fill spout is leaking, or I mean, there's still a bunch of crud down here that I didn't get, so I don't know if that's coming from the other side, but there's oil spun up in here, so it's pretty much everywhere. And this might I don't know, might take a while to figure it out. I don't think it's a crank seal, because it seems to be, although it could be rear crank. I don't know. I gotta figure it out. We'll do some digging around. I'm gonna let this dry off. We gotta replace this fuel filter. We'll do an oil change, and then I still need to find a working battery. I've got 3 batteries, spare batteries that I've had on the charger, and none of them are holding a charge, so I might just have to go out and buy a new one. All right, so I just went to go check this oil again. It's been sitting for a few days since we washed it, and it's bone dry. So we definitely got an oil leak, which is, I kind of assumed just based on the amount of sludge and debris that's sitting on the frame. So I was trying to track it down, and there's a decent size. This fresh stuff is here. I just spilled that, but this puddle here, that's new. I think it's leaking right here. So what I want to do is do a fresh oil change, and I'd like to run it first, so I'm just going to throw some more garage sale oil in here just to have some lubrication. Then we'll run it for a little bit, see if, you know, it's leaking anywhere obviously while it's under pressure, and then go from there. Might just need a new gasket. And then, well, let me take a step back. Let's make sure it actually runs. before I get too far ahead of myself, I did go ahead and get a new battery. All 3 of the batteries that I had were junk, so I had to buy a new one, and I couldn't believe how expensive it was. I paid $60 for riding mower battery. Seems kind of excessive to me, so if you guys know anywhere to get cheap batteries, let me know. It was ridiculous. So obviously I'm way low. I just want to have enough in here to run it for a couple minutes, mix up that sludge that's in the bottom of the crankcase, so we can do a nice oil change. And we'll kind of go from there. The main thing is I want to figure out where it's leaking from, so if it's a gasket or something, I know, if it's a gasket or a seal, I know which part to replace before I send it off to a new owner. And then we got to do fuel filter and oil change and check out the PTO on the deck. Check this out. Genuine Kohler part for this engine. See this size fuel filter? Seems a little bit off. So I'm not sure which one's wrong. Maybe this one I got is, I don't know. I looked up the part number in the parts diagram, so I'm fairly certain that I got the right one. Maybe this old one was no good. Who knows? And a smart guy would have done this before he put fuel in the tank. We're going to run with this just because I have it and it says it's the right part, and I'm going to assume that the old one is incorrect. And if it's not the case, oh well. Alright. Fuel filter, done. Alright. Battery's on. Or not on, but in. Fuel filter's connected. We got our oil sufficient. Let's go run it for a couple minutes and do an oil change. Alright, it might take a while to prime this fuel system. We'll see. I mean, obviously we just had fuel coming out, but it might crank for a little bit. Let me get rid of some stuff here. Alright, so we got fuel coming through the filter, obviously, but it might take a minute to prime the pump. Let's see what we got. Throttle up, choke on. You know, we injected fuel and I never checked the carburetor. So I bet you that is biting us. I thought it was clean. The fuel tank was clean. I kind of made an assumption. You know how that works. So. Forgot I had the transmission neutral switch unlocked so I could roll it. So it scared me for a second there when I went to put it in gear and didn't go anywhere. Everything works pretty well. I just checked the PTO and I got no response. So after we do an oil change, we're gonna have to dig into that. If you remember, there's a little bit of some wiring modifications. So we're gonna have to test that PTO and make sure everything's working. But let's get that oil change. So this is the first Cub Cadet that I've worked on. And I don't know if they have this for all of their lawnmowers, but the oil change drain plug, or oil drain plug, has got this kind of weird, it took me a while to figure it out, well not a while, but it took me a minute to figure it out. But it's actually kind of cool. You just slip a hose on the end, preferably one that doesn't have a crack in it, and then you can just turn, once the hose is on, open her up, and it should just pour it out. It seems kind of a neat design. I don't know if this came on the machine or if this is like an aftermarket thing or what, but I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm gonna let that drain out and maybe we can assist it a little. All right, come back in a minute. All right, so I'm gonna have to take a break here because I'm trying to figure out where this oil leak is coming from, and I think it might actually be the front crank seal. I don't know if you can tell, but there's nothing obvious. I can't see anywhere where there's fresh oil leaking, which is weird because I just filled this thing up, I don't know, probably a couple weeks ago. This is just from me filling it today. I can't see fresh oil leaking anywhere. There is a lot of, oil debris in here underneath this front crank. And when I was looking at it before, from this side, I didn't think it looked too bad. But there's also, it's just everywhere. So I think I'm gonna have to tear this apart a little bit more to figure out, there's gotta be a seal or a gasket that's leaking somewhere. So I'm gonna have to tear this apart a little bit further. I'm not seeing anything obvious, which is kind of a bummer. So in the meantime, I'm gonna kind of change gears. I think what we'll do is we'll zip this front cover off, because if I'm gonna order a new front crank seal, I gotta take the PTO off, and obviously it'll be a little bit easier with the hood off. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna dive into this PTO switch a little bit more and see if we can get that thing working. All right, let's get these headlights disconnected. I kind of like, it's interesting working on different brands and seeing what you do and don't like as far as how they kind of manufacture their stuff. And I like how on my John Deere the hood is super easy to pop off. It's just, you tip it into position and it's got a detent and it pops right out. This one is a little bit more work, but I think it's just 2 bolts on each side and we should be able to take it off. Trickier part is going to be getting those headlights out. The bulbs themselves they're kind of, the plastic is real brittle and I don't want to break them, so let's see if we can just maybe pop this off and set it out of the way somehow. Like so. And then, what do you think? I'd like to leave the bulbs in and just remove the connectors if we can do it without breaking them. pretty awesome. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's pretty crummy in there. Alright. Now there's just a couple of clips here for the wiring. Of course, that one is completely hidden. Let's see. I did test the headlights, and they do work, you know, as far as our electrical diagnosis. They come off the same wiring harness. There's really only one main wiring harness. So that points to the problem being kind of directly either at the PTO switch, or the wiring to the PTO. And I gotta get a pair of needle nose pliers to get in here. So like it's got these clips. You just compress the sides and it should pop right out. It's just that this one is kind of hard to get to. In fact, here we go. There we go. All right, hood is free. All right, we're gonna try to remove the whole muffler, exhaust, and the shroud all in one piece. Because these two screws had already snapped off, I'm willing to bet every other one would as well. And it's all gotta come out to get the PTO off. And I see that this exhaust valve or exhaust gasket is cracked anyways, so we may as well break it here and kind of save ourselves a headache, as long as we don't bust the stud off. So there's the two nuts here on the exhaust flange, and it looks like two nuts on the bottom side, and hopefully the whole thing should just pop right out. These ones are kind of hard to get to. Yeah, I kind of thought when today began, I thought, yeah, you know, come out, do an oil change, throw that fuel filter on, check the PTO, everything will be great. Get this thing listed by the end of the day. But it seems like there's always one more thing to do. So we know for sure we're gonna have to figure out this oil leak, and exhaust gasket now, and what else? PTO wiring. So that's not terrible, but you know, winter is soon approaching, and the market for riding mowers is disappearing. So I wanted to get this thing sold before winter. let's see how we did. We're there. Anything else holding it? Oh, yep, we got one more bolt. 3 bolts on the bottom. Almost. All right. Now we have unimpeded access to the PTO, and boy is it dirty down there. Geez, I wonder if that's a sump gasket, to be honest. I might go ahead and replace both. Let me show you. So, crank seal, obviously we got some debris beneath there, but look at all that under here. Now with the PTO here, it's gonna drip on these belts, and it's gonna fling crap everywhere. So it's kind of hard to diagnose. But if you look up right under here, I don't know. Might be both. Might be one. It's hard to say. I think to be safe, we may as well just do both. I got about $260 into this machine already, and I don't know, I'm hoping to get 600 for it. So that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think it's probably, I've seen it going anywhere from 3 to 700 depending on condition. So we may as well spend a few extra bucks to replace this oil leak. So I'm tracking down the wiring for this PTO switch. Just kind of going through everything, assessing why the PTO is not engaging, and tracing it down, following it through, pull back this loom wrap, and yeah, we had the old duct tape finish here. So that might have something to do with it. I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this all cleaned up, and then kind of inspect a little further, because it looks like there's been some more wiring modifications. We'll have to get those all fixed up. Well, things have progressed. Still trying to figure out where this oil leak is coming from, and I've decided to pull the whole engine off the machine. And it wasn't really too much work. Grounding wire, starter, positive lead comes off, and then choke in the throttle cable. It's got this weird kind of baffle tin here that's connected to the engine shroud cover, and I wanted to pull this back just to see if there was a crank seal that was leaking. There's a lot of oil back in here, and I really can't get at everything with the engine on the machine, so I wanted to pull it off. And then the last thing is, this is a direct drive, so if you can see back here, I had to remove 4 bolts on the drive shaft, and that just slides right off. So all I have left to do is the fuel line and then disconnect this interlock, and should come right off. There's the 4 engine mount bolts underneath, and with any luck we'll be able to pull this off and figure out where it's leaking from. Alright, so got the engine off. I guess this baffle is not connected, but either way it had to come. It's just easier to take the engine out. You can see there's a lot of debris and oil gunk under here, especially in the front. I still think it's this sump seal. I was looking it up trying to find a replacement gasket for the sump gasket, and I guess it's just like an RTV silicone. It's not an actual gasket, but you can see like on the lower side these bottom bolts are just caked, so I think there's got to be, you know, a leak somewhere here on the bottom, and it's just with the revolutions from the belt, it's just flinging it everywhere. I think that's what it is, but I want to get this front cover off just to make sure there's nothing going on this side, you know, before I tear apart that sump. All right, let's get this cover off and see what we got going on underneath here. Yeah. One more set. We gotta, I think I'm just gonna remove this cover. Oh yeah, there's a lot of crap in here. So it's still, you know, it's frustrating that to take the extra time to pull the engine. It's not a real big deal. It was probably a half hour to get this thing out. And that's mostly just me figuring out how it comes apart, but this was a little, I don't want to say complicated, but I don't know. It took a little bit longer than I thought. Just there's access is restricted, so it was tough. But it is a good thing to pull this apart. I've kind of resigned myself to the conclusion that I'm probably not going to be able to sell this machine this year. I'm just running out of time with it, with winter approaching. And look at that. But the nice thing about getting this thing all cleaned up is that A, it's going to be clean, and B, it'll just be easier to diagnose what's going on instead of just sending this down the road with a known oil leak. It's not good for business. So I'm just going to take some time and kind of clean up some of the crud in here. Ideally, I want to, you know, get this thing all cleaned up so I think the idea is I'm probably going to just fill it up with some more garage sale oil after this thing's all clean, and then hopefully I can see where it's actually leaking from. I took the deck off when I was messing with the engine. It was just easier to get the engine out. It looks in decent shape. I'm gonna grease everything before I put it back together. The spindles, I mean, it's not, cosmetically it's not the greatest, but the spindle bearings, it's rubbing on the grass, but the spindle bearings feel okay. There's not any play in them. It's rusty, but there's no big holes or anything. Obviously the paint is all gone, but it looks in pretty good shape. So I don't think there's really a whole lot to do with the deck. Belts are all good. And I've got the engine back on. Went together smooth. A lot easier when it's clean. So everything's back together. I'm gonna get the deck underneath, get that back attached, and then we'll go from there. All right, it's mostly put back together. Deck is on. PTO's back in. What else? Batteries reconnected. Fuel line's on. Starter's reconnected. All I have left to do is I gotta fix all this wiring and re-lume it, and then fix this PTO splice where it got torn, and then hopefully that PTO works. I do have a new relay coming for the PTO. Hopefully that solves our issue. And you know what's going to happen as soon as I fire this thing up? It's just going to start puking oil, but we'll give it a shot. All right, choke is on, throttle, brake. Hopefully it fires. It might take a minute to prime the fuel. What am I forgetting? We got fuel coming. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it needs a relay. It might have like a PTO. That might work on the PTO kill switch. I smell fuel coming, so we got that. So it's either spark. Yeah, let me throw that relay in real quick. All right, here's that relay switch. Just plugs into here, and then hopefully it'll fire up. All right, let's try this again. Should have something by now. Alright, so it's quite a few days later now. Winter, fall has gotten the best of me, and I've got a ton of work to get done still. So this is probably going to be the last day I can work on this machine, and I've decided that I'm just going to kind of wrap it up for the year and winterize it. I don't have time to work on it anymore. There's a ton of stuff that needs to get done before winter, so the only things I want to do before I put it away, just so I don't forget until spring, I want to get everything greased, and I want to try to take care of this loom wrap, get that redone just so I don't forget how it went. Still don't. It still doesn't fire, so there's something in the fuel line, or an issue with the fuel line. I don't know if the fuel pump is not working, or if the carburetor needed to be cleaned in the first place. So we probably should have started there. It seemed clean, so. I was having a hard time with these grease fittings, and you can see I've already cleared out the two front axles. And what I did was I picked up one of these grease fitting rejuvenators. This one is by IPA. I got it from Northern Tool, and it works pretty slick. So the theory is that over time these fittings and the joints just sit with old grease that kind of cakes in there and gets hard. So that's why you'll find if you go to grease these joints like I did, it wouldn't take grease. It was plugged hard. So with this rejuvenator tool, you can see the back end here is a piston that pulls out. Then you fill this reservoir with, it just says light oil. I'm using ATF because that's what I have. And then you can stick this end on your fitting, and it uses hydraulic force. You can either push this piston in by hand, or they recommend tapping it. So we'll see. I've already gone ahead and done the first two. There's one if you can see this way back here. Just barely reach. Alright, so we got it locked on, and I'm just going to try to gently press. Yeah, there's a little resistance, but it's going. And then eventually you'll see we should get this ATF should come pouring out of the joint, and that tells you that it's clean. Now the hard part about this specific tool and some of the negative reviews that you'll see online, once that end is locked on, it's kind of tough to get it off. So you have to, of course, this is not the most ideal placement, but you can unthread this collar just a little bit. It says a quarter turn, but I found that it takes a little bit more than that. You just want to be careful that this end doesn't come off, because there are the locking jaws that are in there, and you don't want to start dropping parts. So just take your time. I'm only doing a little, maybe like an eighth of a turn at a time, because I can't really tell how many. There we go. So you can see by rotating this is the collar that's on here, and it tightens up these teeth. So when you're using it normally, you want this to be not like, reefed down, but just finger tight. That way it'll latch onto the fitting and lock on. So looks like that joint is clean. I'm going to go ahead and grease everything up, and then I'll probably bring you back after I get this all loom wrapped, and we'll kind of do one final walkthrough for this video. Alright, loom wrap is all done, and I think that's going to about do it for this machine this year. I know it's not the result that I wanted. I'm sure you guys were looking forward to seeing this thing run too. I really wanted to get this thing running and sold before, well, fall and winter, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I'm going to get this thing put away for the winter, and then we'll pick it back up in the spring. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave me a note in the comment section below. And until next time, thanks for watching.